The Orcs are hands down the most crazy and over-the-top faction in all of Warhammer 40K, and personally I think they're the most popular as well. Everybody in the 40K community has a favorite faction, and it's a time-honored tradition to justify our personal favorite by talking shit about everybody else's. That being said, I have never heard somebody speak ill of the Orcs. They're great and everyone loves them, and I will not tolerate anyone saying otherwise. Today we're going to be talking about all of the different orc clans because they're all wildly different from one another and have some pretty interesting conflicting philosophies on the nature of the universe, the best way to live one's life, and most importantly, what's the best way to get stuck in a fight? We're going to be talking about a clan of orcs that is famed for being the biggest, toughest, and meanest around, due to the fact that their primary strategy of warfare revolves around charging headlong into the enemy guns. A clan of orcs that is seen as outcast by all the rest, as they actually take the time to come up with tactics and strategies rather than just charging into the fight. A ridiculous concept to the orcs. We're also going to be talking about a clan that's not actually a clan at all, and is made up of a bunch of different orcs from different tribes that were kicked out for being a weird bunch of misfits. So what did they do instead? Band together and become pirates. We're going to be talking about all that and a whole lot more, but first a quick shout out to this video's sponsor, and then we're going to dive headfirst into the grimdark. If you've been watching my channel for a long time, then you know I'm a massive fan of Into the AM, as not only do they make some of the coolest graphic tees on the internet, but they've been a sponsor of this channel since basically the beginning. They're always a pleasure to work with, and behind the scenes, they're an oddly wholesome company. I wear these shirts just about every single day, even when I'm not making a sponsored segment for them. They're comfortable, shrink resistant, have some of the best designs I've ever seen, and as is most important in these trying times, super reasonably priced, as you can get a bundle of 3 of their graphic tees for only $60, or 3 of their basic tees for only $49.95. On top of that, if you use the code Weshammer at checkout, or the link in the description of this video, you can save an additional 10% off your entire order, and that code is good for the entire website. Whether you're buying a bundle, getting something out of the discount section, or picking up one of their fantastic new designs. If I'm being honest with you, at this point I think I own like 20 or 30 of their shirts, and every single time I think I have enough, they come out with a killer new design and I have to have it. The big news is that this weekend, Into the AM is having a massive site-wide sale, so now is the perfect time to pick up some amazing shirts. And the best part is my discount code stacks with any of the savings you'll find during that sale. The sale runs from right now through the weekend, so go to intotheam.com and pick out something awesome. You can thank me later. Big thanks to Into the AM for sponsoring this video. Out of all the factions in the 42nd millennium, none quite capture 40K's brutality quite like the Orcs. They are savage, aggressive, and admittedly, kind of hilarious. There are a lot of different types of Orcs, as there are 6 different clans that each have their own different philosophies and way of conducting war.
Each of the clans has their own particular thing, see? The Evil Sons is fast, loves their trucks. The Death Skulls is a bunch of filchers. Bad Moons is snobby and flash, and the Blood Axes is a pack of filthy Umi lovers, and the Snake Bites is just weird. Us Goffs is the biggest, and the greenest, and the meanest, of course. That's what makes us the best bosses.
The Orcs are a race that doesn't waste time thinking about the nonsensical traditions of other species, like military organization, caste-based systems, or even an individual's role within society. To the Orcs, this is all done at an instinctive level. Each and every one of the boys knows exactly who and what they are, and knows where to find other boys that think just like they do. The closest thing resembling any kind of actual structure that the Imperium has been able to witness within Orc culture is that of the tribes, clans, and warbands. The structure of an Orc tribe is remarkably simple, especially when you compare it to the often archaic hierarchical structures within the Imperium of Man. And you can think of it like this: a tribe is ruled over by a warlord, and the tribe itself is made up of a bunch of different war bands that are each ruled over by a war boss. Each of those war bands is in turn made up of a bunch of different mobs, groups of orcs bound together as social or fighting units, often coming together with a preferred style of combat. Tribes include every boy, squig, runt, orc war engine, or odd boy making a claim to any location that they happen to wander into, as well as any shiny gubbins they happen to come across. The culture of which varies from tribe to tribe. Some orc tribes are built out like a sprawling scrap fortress, giant clusters of junk strewn together vaguely in the shape of an encampment. They are like a vast junkyard, a shanty town that can have all types of different orky facilities, some of which would include mech boy workshops, pain boy clinics, squig pens, weird boy towers, scrap built bunkers, shoddily dug out racetracks, and even fungus-infested pits that are the equivalent of latrines to the orcs. But they just call them, quote, the drops. But that's just one type of tribal encampment. They can come in numerous different shapes and forms, limited only by the imagination of their green-skin inhabitants. Some tribes don't build permanent structures at all, preferring to live a more nomadic lifestyle. And this is pretty common with tribes made up entirely of speed freaks or beast snaggas. These groups live off the land and smash everything to bits, thieving and eating whatever they want from the wreckage. There have even been reports of a tribe encampment that takes the form of a mobile fortress, created by the eccentric mech boys of the tribe and dragged along by huge teams of trample squigs or motorized vehicles. There are countless tribes and warbands spread out across the galaxy, and most of which will end up being home to orcs from many different clans. As are most things within orc society, tribes are not traditionally seen as permanent. They can sometimes break apart if they get too large and infighting occurs, which is pretty common with the orcs, as they may end up being shattered in a particularly violent war. If it happens that after such an event there are any survivors, they may end up joining a new tribe. They normally find sanctuary in groups that have particularly large abundance of orcs from their own clan. And the roots of the clans run deep throughout orc society and touch on every tribe no matter where they happen to be located. Tribes can owe allegiance through the clan system to orcs they have never met before, separated by vast subsectors. And each individual tribe can be full of orcs from different clans. You can think of it like an orky caste system that is not enforced by societal norms or birthrights, but more so by something ingrained within the orcs at a subconscious level. You see, when each and every orc is created, they instinctively know which clan they belong to. It's not a conscious choice that they make. Each clan is made up of orcs that all collectively share very specific obsessions, inclinations, outlooks, and philosophies. This like-minded view of things is what most orcs describe as their culture. If you didn't know, the orcs put very specific superstitious beliefs on different colors, and due to the orcs' inherent ability to bend reality around their beliefs, there does appear to be some truth to this notion. The most classic example of which being that the orcs believe red things go faster, so a vehicle painted red will in a very real sense go faster than all the rest. They believe blue things are lucky, yellow things make better explosions or generate more wealth, stuff painted black is tough to kill, etc, etc. Each orc has a favorite color, and with very little exception, they will end up finding like-minded brotherhoods of color enthusiasts in whatever clan they happen to be part of, all of them wearing clothing and painting their armor in the same colors. But a clan is more than just aesthetics. All of the orcs within a clan also favor particular styles of war, and tend to have similar outlooks on life, the galaxy, and just about everything else you can think of. There are a lot of different clans throughout the galaxy, but there are 6 main ones that we're going to focus on. The Goff clan, whose color of choice is black, and whose members tend to be bigger and tougher than other orcs. The Evil Sons, who wear reds and oranges and produce the most speed freaks, orcs that are particularly obsessed with going fast. The Death Skulls, which are an orc clan that are known as a bunch of thieving gits, and tend to smear themselves in lucky blue paint. The Blood Axes are a weird clan that have a particular fondness for wearing camouflage. They utilize tactics and strategies that they've witnessed other species using in battle, a concept that is unthinkable to other orcs. The Snakebites are another weird one, in that they're a clan that favors what they refer to as the old ways, wearing leather and primitive clothing and refusing to use any complex orc technology. And finally there's the Bad Moons, and everybody hates the Bad Moons. Well, except for the Bad Moons, of course. Yellow is their preferred color, and they're known as a bunch of rich gits. So let's talk a little bit more about each one of these clans in detail and figure out what makes all of them unique. And we'll start off with the Goffs. The orcs of the Goff clan are known for being the biggest, meanest, and toughest orcs around. They prefer to fight on foot, typically in huge, ground-pounding mobs that are somewhere between a military formation and an all-out riot. They resemble something like a rolling tidal wave of black and green that obliterates everything in its path. When fighting alongside other clans, the Goffs have a tendency to bully their way to the front, eager to get stuck in the fight. They display traits of overt belligerence in the face of imminent peril, a characteristic that they take as a point of pride. No self-respecting Goff who is right in his head would ever shout things like "take cover," or "maybe we should think about this." No, the Goff's way of fighting is to charge in swinging around a big choppa, screaming war cries at the top of their lungs. Now, just because they prefer fighting on foot doesn't mean that the Goffs are against hopping in a truck or a battle wagon from time to time. The Goff clan is not stupid, and they understand that these machines can get them into a fight quicker, which at the end of the day is all anyone can really ask for. They also have a soft spot for big stompy mechs, like Def Dreads, Gorkanauts, and Stompas, all of which can trample their way into a fight, swinging around giant metal fists or whirling buzzsaws. If you were to ask a member of the Goff clan what their preferred weapon was, and most of them would answer something pretty similar, that nothing beats a good old-fashioned choppa and whatever gun fires the most shells per second. But if push were to come to shove, a member of the Goff clan wouldn't scoff at the opportunity to wield something bigger and more killy. Likewise, power claws have become a widely respected melee weapon of choice within the clan. The thing about the Goffs is they have a deep dislike of anything they consider to be, quote, mucking about. Now, for the orcs, this takes the form of anything that wastes time that could be better spent fighting. They don't like using flashy, unpredictable technologies or coming up with strategies and tactics. They consider themselves to be the orkiest of orcs and will happily take any excuse they can get to prove that claim with their fists, tusks, and choppas. Because of their way of life, the Goffs do have the highest rate of attrition amongst the clans. Now, this isn't something they are particularly bothered by, as the younger orcs that couldn't make it through the Goffs' brutal headbutting contests or pit fights wouldn't have survived in a headlong charge into enemy guns anyways. This weeding out of the weak has led the surviving Goff clan members to be warriors that have seen constant, nearly non-stop battle. And with the orcs, the more they fight and the more battles they win, the larger they grow. Because of this, the Goffs have an overabundance of knobs and produce some of the best war bosses in the entire galaxy. If the Goffs prefer to fight on foot, then the Evil Sons are almost the exact opposite of them, in that all of their members have an undeniable urge to travel as fast as they can. They are completely obsessed with raw speed, and their philosophy on life comes down to acquiring ever faster and shootier vehicles. They race across the battlefield, howling like lunatics, moving unpredictably, whooping and roaring as they hurtle around their foes' flanks or tear through their battle lines and out the other side, amidst clouds of fumes and dust. They are particularly fond of a good chase, as it really lets them open up their throttles against foes who would seek to flee from them or even engage in hit-and-run style warfare. Their enemies that do this quickly find themselves in a life-or-death race against a pack of wildly grinning Evil Sons orcs. Their colors of choice are bright oranges and reds, which comes as little surprise considering the orcs' inherent belief that red things go faster. The orcs of the Evil Sons that manage to scrape together enough teeth will inevitably blow them on a souped-up dragsta or its equivalent from one of the Mech Boys' workshops. And the Mech Boys have a ton of different vehicles to choose from half-track warbikes, teleporting combat dragstas, speed wagons bristling with guns, overcharged trucks, or other vehicular nightmares pulled out of the deepest corners of the Mech Boys' imagination. Each of the orcs of the Evil Sons will end up customizing their rides with bizarre personal improvements, and it's not uncommon for the richest Evil Sons to drive contraptions powered by jet thrusters, bladed propellers, or squig oil fusion engines. These vehicles boast everything from crackling energy blasters to nose drills, and each of which, of course, wouldn't be complete without a giant red Go Fasta button that also doubles as a cigar lighter. Because of their obsession with speed, the Evil Sons tend to live a nomadic life, rarely staying in one place for long. It's important to know that although the Evil Sons have the largest concentration of speed freaks within their ranks, not all speed freaks are members of the Evil Sons. They are actually two completely different things. In fact, the speed freaks belong to an orc subculture that is oftentimes referred to as the Cult of Speed. These are orcs that are addicted to racing into battle as fast as possible, and they do so aboard whatever scrap metal speedster, souped-up dragsta, or warbike they can get their hands on. Speed freaks will often gather together in sizable mobs during the rare lulls between warfare, and engage in breakneck races around, or as is more often the case with the orcs, right through their tribe's encampments. I'll forgive you for thinking that other orcs would be upset by such displays, but the reality is they view it as peak entertainment, placing huge bets on whatever speed freak they believe will make it over the finish line first, or conversely, who will end up on fire in a ditch. At the end of the day, all orcs like to go fast. Some just like it a lot more than others. Speed freaks can exist in any of the orc clans, just the largest concentration of them happens to be within the Evil Sons. The currency that the Evil Sons use to purchase these vehicles are teeth, the orcs' most common form of currency, and it makes sense for them to use these, as there's a steady supply and they grow at a very predictable rate. However, there is a clan known as the Bad Moons that has a natural advantage over other orcs in that their teeth grow at a much faster rate. Because of this, the Bad Moons have become known as the richest orc clan, And these orcs love flaunting their wealth through garishly colored clothing, copious amounts of flashy gold piercings and jewelry, and even more gaudy hats and trinkets. But even more so than clothing, the Bad Moons put their teeth into ever more flashy and lethal custom war gear. They sport the most cutting edge of orc technology and have some of the biggest and killiest guns. Naturally, their clan color is yellow, which the orcs associate with wealth and better explosions. They plaster it on everything they own, whether it's on themselves or whatever they're riding into war. The Bad Moons have a reputation for being looters, mercilessly ransacking the temples and cultural centers of different species in order to steal everything golden or fancy they can get their claws on. Oftentimes, they will wear these ancient relics of significant importance to a different species as a trinket or trophy, or, as is more common, melt them down to make something more distinguished and elegant, like a hulking gold nose ring or a gold-plated ram for the front of their battle wagon. There are even some reports of the Bad Moons melting down said artifacts of other races to use as golden bullets for their guns. The only real drawback to their over-the-top way of life is that the average Bad Moon warband can be seen coming from a mile away. One recorded instance stated that the Bad Moon's incoming assault was spotted with the naked eye from low orbit. The Bad Moons don't think this is a problem, however. If the enemy knows where they are, they reason that a good fight will be coming sooner rather than later. Their warbands are famous for their abundance of overwhelming firepower, riding into battle with belligerent confidence, and laying down enough Daka to take the legs out from a charging Imperial Knight. They utilize a vast array of custom shootas, crackling energy weapons, tricked-out battle wagons, and squadrons of aircrafts that are so loaded up with frankly ridiculous amounts of Daka that it's honestly a miracle they can get airborne at all. Orcs of other clans tend to look down on the Bad Moons, thinking them weak and show-offish. But the reality is that they're just as tough as the other orcs, they just like to be blisteringly visible whenever they fight. And if the orcs of the other clans were being honest, they might just be jealous of some of that fancy war gear the Bad Moons has access to. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the Snakebites, who prefer to live a much more primitive life and are as far away from the Bad Moons as you can possibly get. As instead of wearing the flashy, obnoxious clothing of the Bad Moons, they prefer to wear gnarled, weather-worn garbs made from beast-hide leather. The Snakebites are as traditional as orcs come, favoring primitive war gear in comparison to the Bad Moon's flashy Daka. They show nothing but hate for anything they see as needlessly newfangled or fiddly, which, if we're being honest, encompasses the vast majority of things within the galaxy. They are seen as grumpy, stodgy, and uncompromising in their views, and look down on other orcs who utilize tech they don't understand. They're basically the orc boomers, and prefer to live by what they refer to as the old ways. Now that's not to say that they don't utilize anything that could be called technology, as they have their share of mech boys and pain boys as well, just like every other clan. These individuals are just vastly outnumbered by runt herds and weird boys. They employ their orky know-whats only grudgingly, and don't consider a machine or weapon proper until they've built up a good helping of rust or oil. The Snakebites prefer a much more direct solution whenever one is available. Why waste time dyeing their beast hide in funny colors when they could leave them leathery and cure them with squig urine? Why would an orc waste time building a hut when they could just weather the world's storms like a proper orc? Why mess around with high-tech chain-bladed choppas when they're just gonna end up getting clogged up with Humi bits anyways? Especially when a solid metal club will bash in skulls all day every day and never run out of fuel. The other orcs view the Snakebites as crude savages, and although they openly mock their way of life, none of them would deny that living in such a manner makes the Snakebites as hard as they come. To prove just how tough they are, the Snakebites have a ritual wherein each one of them will have to endure being bitten by a plethora of deadly venomous snakes that the clan has collected from across the stars. This has led to many worlds that get invaded by the Snakebites to have the unfortunate side effect of having said snakes released onto their planet. Even if the orcs are ultimately pushed back, this once peaceful world is now full of horrifically poisonous snakes. So I mean, it's not even really worth defending anymore at that point. Although the other orcs look at the Snakebites as being pretty strange, there's actually another orc clan that is hands down seen as utterly alien to the other orcs. And that's the Blood Axes, the current title holder of strangest and most bizarre of all the orc clans. A title that is well deserved, as they do things the other orcs believe are unthinkable. Grievous sins that spit in the face of orc tradition and trample uncaringly on their admittedly limited philosophical beliefs. They have shown a fascination with the tactics and strategies employed by other races, and have gone so far as to formulate battle plans and wear crude camouflage of their own. Needless to say, their infatuation with all things tactical has earned the Blood Axes the moniker of a bunch of cunning gits by the other orc clans. And although they do seem to be tactical masterminds amongst other orcs, from our perspective at the end of the day, they're still orcs, so their tactics are often very direct and extremely violent, often centered around strategies that will see them get stuck in a fight in the fastest and most enjoyable way. In battle, the Blood Axes will deploy commando mobs to sever enemy communication channels and blow up supply depots. They use high-altitude flyovers of Deffkoptas to scout and determine where the enemy is in advance of their hordes. For the Blood Axes, there is no greater joy than catching the enemy off guard in a ferocious ambush of armored orcs that pulverize their way through the enemy ranks. These ambushes have been incredibly successful for them, and they mock the stupid gits of the other clans for not being cunning enough to come up with such genius strategies themselves. But unfortunately for the Blood Axes, the orcs of the other clans will most likely never see them as anything more than a bunch of un-orky cowards. Their ways are just too bizarre and alien to them. The most shocking thing that they do from the other clan's perspective is the attacking of the enemy lines when they're at their weakest, instead of charging headlong into the meat grinder of the biggest and best available fight. To the other orc clans, this is just further evidence of their cowardice. But what they failed to realize is that the Blood Axes like a good crumping just as much as any other orc. They just prefer the odds to be in their favor. My absolute favorite thing about the Blood Axes is that unlike other clans, they don't actually have a favorite color. They instead like to wear camouflage, as many of the other races who use similar tactics to them seem to put a high value on splotchy patterns. They realize that camouflage makes them sneakier, but they don't really fully grasp why. It's not uncommon to see an army of Blood Axes in a wide array of contrasting color schemes, each one of them wearing camouflage, but the particular colors of which rarely match the actual environment. Their belief in camouflage as the superior paint scheme is so strong that they'll even paint their very not sneaky airplanes and war engines in a similar manner. To them, the busier and more thickly applied the camouflage, the sneakier their vehicles will be. This might seem like a silly tradition to people who have read about it but never witnessed it in person, but I'll tell you what, when you see a 50-foot Stompa covered in rainbow tiger stripes lumbering towards you, it's a sight that you won't soon forget. An interesting thing about the Blood Axes is that in the wild frontiers of the Imperium, it's not completely unheard of for them to sell their services as mercenaries. There have been numerous documented accounts of them working alongside humans, and normally demanding payment in the form of weapons, armors, vehicles, and scrap metal of all kinds. However, these reports also indicate that the Blood Axes traditionally will turn those weapons against the enemies of their employers, before inevitably turning them back on their employers as well. They are a very interesting clan that doesn't care what anyone thinks of them. They value results over reputation, and will gladly let the other clans take the brunt of the hit in battle, where they use tactics and strategies to always come out on top. From the Imperium's perspective, the orcs are the most dangerous enemy to fight against as they are completely unpredictable. The Blood Axes take this to an entirely different level, because if somebody was just to say out loud that the orcs are capable of strategizing, that idea in itself is tantamount to heresy. The Blood Axes are all too happy to prove their enemies wrong. If the Blood Axes are looked down upon for being sneaky through the use of tactics and ambushes, then the Death Skulls have a similar sneaky reputation, but theirs comes from them being a bunch of shifty, thieving gits. Google defines property as a thing or things belonging to someone, and I think we can all agree that possessing a thing that you bought or created makes it your property. Well, the orcs of the Death Skulls feel that possession is merely 9/10 of the law, while the last 10th is violently asserting the other 9. They are a sneaky, amoral bunch of orcs who will gleefully steal another orc's favorite Shuda from right under his nose, before swiftly painting it blue and throwing a couple of customizations onto it, before turning around and selling it right back to them as a brand new piece of gear. It says a lot about just how smart orcs are that the Death Skulls get away with these scams pretty smoothly, and they've proven to be quite lucrative for them. There have been other instances where an orc will call them out for thieving, and they'll discover too late in the ensuing fight that someone also nicked all of the pins on the stick bombs on their belt. They are a superstitious lot that puts a lot of stock in the color blue as being the luckiest color. Thus, them and all of their equipment sports a thick, heavy coat of it, allowing them to pull off heists that none of the other clans would be capable of. Don't get it twisted. At the end of the day, the Death Skulls are still orcs. They like a proper fight just as much as the other clans. They just see battle primarily as an opportunity for some good old-fashioned looting. Before the fight gets underway, it's not uncommon for the Death Skulls to be sizing up enemy tanks, weapons, planes, and war engines as something that they would like to nab when the fighting is done. Or to be honest, in a lot of instances, a horde of Death Skulls will whip out wrenches in the middle of a fight and start prying bars mid-battle, ripping enemy tanks or fortifications apart for useful scrap. This is especially distressing to whatever enemy crew or garrison troops may still happen to be inside that fortification or vehicle at the time. So their enemies don't like them, and the other orcs hate them. But that doesn't mean the Death Skulls don't have some pretty important friends, as the Mech Boys absolutely love these guys, as they provide a constant stream of loot and components for their crazy inventions. When the fighting is done, the Death Skulls will often latch long, rusty chains to any burned-out wrecks and drag them to the nearest mech workshop. The mechs in turn will provide them with better custom gear, new vehicles, and upgrade all of their existing Daka with wildly inventive new customized bits. Because of their thieving ways and alliance with the Mech Boys, the Death Skulls are famous for having the most weird orc technology within their warbands. Whether those take the form of bubble chuckas, teleporter technology, customized energy fields, or just about any other crazy invention the Mech Boys can come up with. So now that we know about all of the major orc clans, let's talk about my personal favorite, which exists as a bit of an oddity because it's not actually recognized as a clan at all. In fact, if we wanted to get technical with it, it's a clan for the clanless. You see, not all orcs end up fitting into their tribe's unique culture, and they might be too mean and spiteful, have funny ideas about loot, or they may not be able to grasp the concept that those that are bigger, tougher, and meaner than them are naturally their betters. One of the fundamental orky laws of the universe. Such individuals may find themselves as outcasts and thrown out of their tribe. Now, if they manage to survive, they may just become what is known as a freebooter instead. The freebooters are the sneakiest, nastiest, and most self-interested orcs in the galaxy. They are a host of adventurers, rogues, and mercenaries who rebel even against the strictures of orc society. Any orc can become a freebooter. It doesn't matter if they're a mech, pain boy, knob, weird boy, whatever. The only requirement is that they don't fit into where they were born, and find a new family amongst a bunch of other orky misfits instead. It might not have been their decision to leave. They may have committed to a string of misdeeds that finally got to be too much for their warlord to tolerate. Whether they take the form of a bad mech who built a contraption that blew up half his tribe, a speed freak that applied one too many unstable custom jobs to an excessive number of the tribe's wagons, or a pain boy who had a particular fascination with stitching on extra limbs to his patients. Because they are made up of a mismatch of different orcs, each freebooter crew is wholly unique, and there's no telling what they're going to end up fielding in battle. The idea of the freebooters is built upon the rejection of orc culture, but even then, some traditions are too deeply ingrained even for them. They still mob up with other like-minded orcs, it's just that they're like-minded misfits and outcasts, and it's said that their warbands accumulate like void barnacles on a kill cruiser's hull. They are a band of motley mercenary pirates that roam the galaxy's space lanes at random, preying on everything from cargo ships and warcrafts to isolated colonies and naval space stations. Although, realistically, the freebooters will raid and loot anything that they deem quote-unquote worth a go. The freebooters are perhaps the only orcs that don't fight simply for the joy of fighting. They are pirates and expect financial compensation for their efforts. Each and every one of them is driven by the innate desire to claw together as much loot as possible, and whether that loot come in the form of teeth, scrap, weapons, or anything they happen to fancy, like gaudy clothes and trinkets, or in one famous instance, an Inquisitor's fancy hat.
I like your hat, by the way.
Their war bosses often title themselves as captains or admirals, or other such terms that they admittedly don't fully understand. They just recognize that it has something to do with sailing and it sounds fancy. These war bosses rule by two simple principles. The first is that as long as the loot keeps flowing, then the lads are less likely to challenge them. And the second is that the freebooters are ferociously competitive and will always try to prove that they're better than their crewmates. A cunning captain will keep the boys busy trying to one-up each other. That way they don't get any funny ideas in their head that challenging the captain is actually a good idea. From the outside perspective, members of the Imperium and other xenospecies that frequently come into contact with the orcs don't see any of this freebooter culture. They just see a bunch of frenzied orc raiders that have taken a fancy to motley pirate garb and have come to loot, plunder, and murder everything in their path. But from the audience's perspective, they're a bunch of orc pirates, what's not to love? All of the orc clans are wildly unique and a super interesting part of Warhammer's lore. Which one was your favorite and why? What's your favorite thing about the orcs? Are they actually the best faction in all of 40K, or do you think their popularity is simply a result of them having the best memes? Let me know all of your thoughts down in the comment section because I genuinely love hearing what you all think. Also, let me know what other topics you'd love to hear me cover. And if you made it all the way to the end of the video and you're not subscribed yet, come on, what are you doing? Join the Weshammer Freebooter crew. I got a whole ton of super unique videos in the works and I'd hate for you to miss out on them. Also, roll the charge the like button while you're at it. It only takes a second and it helps out the channel quite a bit. Big thanks to everyone who supports the work that I do, and I'll catch y'all on the next one.